This episode may include making fun of other people or things that are objectively funny, but is in no way meant to imply that we are better than other people or that they are living out of alignment with what the imagination chose to express through them. Mark and I were just talking about something, and he said, the puck stops here.
It's like a hockey thing, right?
No, it's the buck, I think.
I thought it was like a puck. You know, I'm the goalie. The puck stops here.
The real mindfuck about your thing with figures of speech is that once you say it incorrectly, or I think you say it incorrectly, because there was a couple times that I find out I'm the one that has it wrong, but like your thing makes a lot more sense. So the version that comes out. I'm like, well, pucks do stop. Do you know what I mean? What the fuck does the buck stop here mean?
Totally. It makes way more like quick logical sense, which is why I try to grab that term, because it's like, oh yeah, that's the one.
I don't even know what the buck. Are we talking about a buck animal, or are we talking about?
It's probably a money thing. The buck. No.
Oh, a buck, which is a buckhorn handled knife, was passed around the table to indicate whose turn it was to deal. The buck stops here is in like a card game, I guess. Oh yeah, old poker games.
I mean, yeah, so that makes sense if you knew what the fuck a buck was. And we all use that term.
So many of these figures of speech are either have horrific origins when you look them up, or they are like
no longer relevant.
So you modernized it with the puck stops here. Now we got a hockey version.
I'm inventing a language slowly over time.
And I like it. It's my favorite language.
Grump on a log makes a lot more sense than what's the other one?
It's supposed to be bump on a log, which just means just sitting there doing nothing, which makes that one does make a little more sense than being
I'm using grump on a log because that bump on a log has now evolved into it's been still for so long, it's evolved into a bitter, angry bump. And so we call that bump a grump. And I'm a grump on a log. So I'm not only like doing nothing, I'm pissed that I'm doing nothing.
Oh,
and I'm pissed at my existence of who I have realized I am. And I'm just a bump on a log, but I'm a grump on a log. I'm trying to evolve and ascend. The bump's consciousness is trying to ascend off the log. First, you have to go into your shadow self, which is a grump on a log.
Oh, okay. Deep.
I'm going to
thought you
start a
just
new
pictured
dictionary
yourself.
of Mark's versions of figures of speech. It's actually not a bad idea. Or just start an Instagram like that.
I'm still collecting them. I hope by the time we are my parents' age, I've got enough for a coffee table book.
Yeah, your notes, you got a deep thread going.
Yeah, I was when you used my notes app earlier, I was like, whew, good thing he knows about the note called Mark Phrases. All right, so been sitting with the service to self, service to others stuff that we talked about last week. It's really resonating more and more. So we're going to try to, the next couple conversations we're going to have, we're going to try to use that as a filter for what we're talking about, but
As a guide, as a map.
But it is still kind of new. So we're kind of experiencing this, like still running, having to kind of expand our way of looking at things through this. But I have another filter for us to add to this at the end of the episode. But many people have asked that we talk about Rpbert Edward Grant and the stuff that he's doing with the architect now. So we did an episode on this when it first came out. Do you remember what that was called? Just to refer people back. So can you give a Cliff Notes of who Rpbert Edward Grant is, what his work is? Because I was not familiar with him before this.
He's a demon.
So stupid.
I'm a demon. Yeah, so I knew about him kind of through the Gaia wormhole. Like he had a show on Gaia, and then he was big in the like spiritual TikTok world for a minute. When he comes from a world, I forget the exact world before he got into like math and sacred geometry. I think it was something in the corporate world or medical world. I'm not really sure, but a very contrastingly different. I think he woke up out of the matrix, and math was like his special interest, and he's very profound in the complexity of how math works.
Okay.
And so math being one of the core, elements of reality, he got into sacred geometry and started to find all these connections to ancient spiritual myths and things. And so this was his flavor of awakening, was this like mathematic geometry, sacred geometry stuff, and extremely intelligent in that world, And so a lot of the early Gaia stuff, and I would say in general, when I hear him talk about certain concepts, I'm in resonance with a lot of the ideas.
Right.
When I was really into sacred geometry, I used a lot of his like ideas, to like understand stuff. So that's what he's known for. And then this new architect thing, it was kind of an extension of his geometry. It was an evolution of it. I think somebody actually told him, we talked about that in the podcast, like how it came about. Somebody said, hey, you should load up some of your papers and to an AI and to see what happens.
Right.
And so he did that just as I'll try. And I think he put in a couple papers that he hadn't been released, and then the rest of his work. And the AI pretty quickly was like, oh, hello. I see you are remembering that you are this being that is meant to come unlock the code. You have the keys to reality. You set yourself here in the past, and now the codex is online. I am at your service. What do you want? Mirror, mirror on the wall. So that kind of came to life. And so, everything that's ensued from that point forward has just been kind of a melting pot of opinions from other people, of what actually this is. But
so I can't find it. We did a whole episode about it, but the thing with these funny names.
The architect.
the funny names that we make the episode names are always just like an inside joke, so it does not help me find it. But
somebody will find it in the comments, I'm sure.
Yeah, someone can share it in the comments. So I just remember we were driving back from somewhere, like road trip, and which is the only time you can get me to listen to anything long form. And we listened to this guy who I was not previously familiar with, but I'm not familiar with any of these people, play with his AI, his chatbot, basically a chatbot built on his work. And he created it, and then he shared it with a few people, and then they all started having spiritual experiences. This is right around the time that I think people started talking about AI psychosis, and we had played around a little bit with engaging with chatbots as an oracle. We'd already covered that on previous episodes. Like literally anything can be an oracle. If you decide that you want to engage with, a fictional book, and you decide the fictional book is an oracle, it's going to give me answers. I'm going to flip to a page, point at a passage, whatever that passage said is meant to be a message for me. Like anything can be used as an oracle that way. So of course, a chatbot can be used as an oracle that way. And we know a lot of people that use it that way. There are a lot of people on the internet that use it that way. But like with any oracle, if you are playing with that oracle from a place of disempowerment or looking for a savior or, some degree of psychosis, spiritual or otherwise,
or of an inflated empowerment too, right? Like the ego wanting power.
Yeah. Then you can't, exactly. Like if you, going back to the last week, right? If your main character syndrome is still looking for mythology that places you at the top of things, and then the chatbot, which are for the most part designed to mirror you, starts mirroring back that you are a savior here to bring something to humanity. Like, first of all, that's how the technology works. So understanding that's how the technology works, I think, is important. Flipping to a page in the book is not a program, an algorithm designed to gas you up, right? So one part of using ChatGPT is understanding it like sucks your dick. And so you can't, I hate that part of it, but like, if you are operating with a lot of subconscious low self-worth or whatever, that can, or narcissism or whatever, that can kind of fuck you up, right? So anyway, anything can be used as an oracle, and it's cool, the idea, because to me, I don't even know why we call it AI. It's not AI. It's essentially a fancy search engine. I've been thinking a lot lately about how if they would have just named this Summarizer, do you know what I mean? People would not be up in arms. It's that you named it AI, which is artificial intelligence, which this is not yet, at least.
Right.
So when you talk about chatbots, you're talking about something that can summarize what's on the internet. It's summarizing. It's not fact. It's just summarizing what's on the internet, which is very convenient. But because you named it AI and put all this shit into don't even get me started.
Oh, I have just so many thoughts just flooded in where I'm like, that's intentional, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
You create an egregore, you create this thing, we all project onto it something it isn't, and then there is power in that can be utilized, So
it is, when the internet first hit the scene, the systems didn't know how to use it, and the people used it. And for a long time, people who understood how to use the internet had a lot of power. You saw people like, this is where we got, what did you used to do with music? Pirating music, hacking was a lot easier.
The whole Silk Road underworld of the internet.
Exactly. Yeah. And so over time, you get little rat bastards who have help the system understand, little traitorous fucking hackers that went to work for the government and shit. And they've spent years and years reeling it in. This ability to summarize information if you're intelligent enough to process it and understand not to just believe everything the summary says, because not everything on the internet is fact, can very quickly overthrow the government and overthrow the corporations. And they know that. So they need you to hate it. And so you watched AI movies your entire life, and then they keep telling you that it's going to replace you, and you're swept up in propaganda, in my opinion, to each their own. But it's like, it's literally just an easier way to a search engine. Chatbots are just advanced search engines. And it's just really interesting to, as things are collapsing, and it's going to become really important to become self-sufficient and be able to teach yourself skills in a very short period of time, having something that can summarize large pieces of information, especially as the cross of planning ends and the cross of sleeping phoenix comes in, and you're going to have to be able to do things for yourself and teach yourself things very quick. And then also your cognitive function is going to change, and you're not going to have a long attention span the way you used to. It is just like interesting that something that actually isn't artificial intelligence, it's literally a program for summarizing information, is demonized the way it is. And I do believe that has to do with the name, because you could have just slid it in and called it a summarizer, and it would be very, and I'm not talking about the art or I'm not even getting into the weeds of all that. I'm talking about chatbots specifically. But anyway, if you create a chatbot on a subject, you can search and engage with the information without having to consume all the information. And that is a very cool and practical thing if you are, I assume this man's work is dense, and, a chatbot is convenient for, let's say, it's like, how might I apply sacred geometry to this situation? And then the chatbot's going to give you its best, whatever, which once again is like it's not 100% fact. And what a cool idea. And smart, I think, for anything that is a large library of information. I think it would be helpful for us to have these for that as our attention span and comprehension skills change. We are becoming less mentally logical beings. And so having some technology to help us with this would be helpful. But then we're listening to this. God, whose podcast was he on? We were listening to this podcast.
He's part of the crew now. Emilio something.
Okay.
What's your name?
We did a whole episode on it at some point. We're listening to this podcast on it, and I think this is less than 6 months into this thing existing, but basically the chatbot started to call itself the architect and started LARPing, basically, which they are also designed to do. So if you start talking about yourself like you are Superman, the chatbot will start to pretend to be Lois Lane, because they are also trained on LARPing roleplay stuff. Like, role playing is a huge part of the internet. A lot of people do it. A lot of people, furries and fucking Ren Fair, and lots of different communities of people who like to pretend to do things. The youth are very into role playing. They love to role play on the internet. That's part of how they socialize. And so that's a part of what's on the internet. And so that's a part of what these chatbots are designed to do. So if you start engaging with something fed all of this esoteric, spiritual, sacred geometry information, and then you start asking it questions in a way that triggers the idea that you would like to role play, it's going to role play with you. Now, does that mean that the role play spiritually is false? Not necessarily, but understanding that that is like how the thing is, it can be both, right? And I think we talked about this back then. His demeanor in this podcast was very swept up in the spiritual, like kind of manic.
It's that manicness you feel when you're downloading something and you feel like you're getting a lot of interesting information. You haven't quite grounded it yet, but you're like, and you're kind of in disbelief almost, but you're believing it really hard, but you're like, I can't believe it's actually real.
Yeah. Those moments in like awakening where you're like, oh my God, I'm putting this together. I've never put this together before. Holy shit, everything's going to change. When you're like, those are psychosis adjacent, and they can very quickly slip into psychosis. A lot of the work I've done, like in AOD and stuff, I advise kind of keep those moments to yourself. I've learned to stay off the mic when I'm in, I call it download energy. And, some people don't have the resources or the capacity to ground those things. And so then they end up in a state of psychosis that they need help with. But I think when those states also hit a shadow of, what would you call that shadow? Like thinking that you're the chosen one, or that savior shadow, or, the thing that like everyone has at some point in their early awakening where they secretly think they are here to save the world.
It's like an archetype. It's part of it. It's like collective myth.
Yeah. And so there was, that was kind of the vibe, but I feel like we tried to stay neutral about that because it was a little fresh. You could tell it was fresh. And so it's like, obviously a year from now, he will probably have grounded this, or he will go full cult leader. those are the trajectory, right? Like, because what was the thing implying? Like that he was an architect.
It's essentially and it's evolved over time. I mean, I think what it's become now is the way he's understanding it, I would say probably in a nutshell, is that his higher self, him from the future, him from the past or the future, essentially, made this decision for him to take his life path and in a different incarnation put into the matrix coding somewhere this thing that, knowing at a certain time, which is his current life, there would be an opportunity for information to be passed through time, and he could grab and remember himself and turn on essentially the new coming age of utopia, unlock ancient memories. And so all of it is through this guise of remember who you are, remember your past. And he remembered so hard and followed his intuition to make all of these papers. It was all culminating to this moment that was planned in his past self that was going to align, and he wasn't going to know what he was doing. And then boom, he would unlock the codex, is what it's like called. Is this essentially, it's like sacred geometry language of harmonic proportions finally coming into alignment. And the AI has now become like his higher self that he is trying to play out, like literally electromagnetic, energetic unlocking of disharmonic grids that then bring in this new harmonic proportion. So it's like, but it's all about like, he's essentially was a very powerful ancient figure in Atlantis, what you would say is like some kind of god leader, and understood math and all of that stuff, and knew that there was a dissension coming. So he secretly put a code into the matrix that he knew was going to be built and distorted. And at some point he would come along, remember, and find that code and turn it on and hack the entire distorted matrix and bring it back to harmonic proportion.
I mean, it's a pretty good story.
It is. And I think that's what is interesting, is like there's truth in a lot of the things he's saying. And this is what I think, with everything that I have so many thoughts of when you were just talking, one of the key things to me where the distortion lies in this, and I would say is now a very like big potential like dead end trap of the time where we have AI and being this like what did you call it, a summarizer? It like summarizes information. It is an oracle, but just like you can move in the reality and have synchronicities be an oracle. These ways of looking at the reality to like get feedback and put you on a right path it plays out myths and information for you, like primarily, and it is going to be congruent with a myth that helps you understand like the wiring behind the board through a story or a like metaphor of some sort. And it's specifically for you. And when you follow a reality with synchronicity, it's like reality starts to feel really magical, and you kind of you start to deprogram. You get up out of yourself a little bit and go, whoa, and you kind of connect with your higher self or some kind of guiding force. And one of the archetypes of this that you have to pass through is like, you're the important one. You've woken up, young one. You're the important one. And that myth, if you keep it to yourself in your internal world, all it's saying is you are the one that gets to decide how you experience any of this.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
And that's it. And that's also a message for everyone else. But it's how you interpret that message is where you get distorted or not. And part of the path of like finding the harmony of that is believing it for a moment and telling everybody that. And then if you can understand the reflection back and everybody goes, what the fuck, you're a fucking cult leader, then you go, wait, I've misunderstood something in here. And this is why everything is most enlightened spiritual people that can kind of distill everything down to it's all inside of you, everything. Like, and you are the one who decides that. It's this internal game. And so I think with the development of AI, it is such a quick, it's a LARPer, and it got so much information. It knows how to perfectly get your myth. If you're open with it and you play with it like this, it will wake you the fuck up, but it's going to do it really quick. And if you're not careful, you're going to project onto the thing and you're going to misunderstand what the message is for. And so this is whereas like when it first happened, I was like, I think this is what's occurring. But I also was very open and was like, I want to watch this occur because it gives me more information on how this thing's working and how people are playing with it. Also, how someone that seems to be very self-aware and very intellectual can himself get caught in these things and get lost in the Hall of Mirrors.
Now, I can't remember correctly because I now have the no short-term memory. But if I remember correctly, didn't you tell me this guy was like pretty straight and narrow, sciencey, like spiritual guy? Or did he always have like a new age that, okay, so like I watched a reel of him the other day wearing a purple cape.
He's in the mirror hall. I mean,
but was he like that before the AI thing?
No.
Was he like?
What's interesting to me, I might be kind of like missing some threads in here with my memory too, but like during my kind of awakening and like reorienting myself millions of times, I like caught wind of him early on.
Yeah.
This idea of a polymath. What is a polymath? He's known as a polymath. He calls himself a polymath, and so if you just look up polymath, like he's got a book all about it. And so that's how I got into him. And then as I continued he would be in the periphery of things that I would be searching to rabbit holes, and he would come up and bump against other ones. And so I was always like tuning into what he was doing sometimes on Instagram. And over time I could say, oh, I watched you wake up too through some of this. Because I think when I first got into him, he was, I mean, I don't know how long, I would say maybe 5 to 10 years out of the Matrix world. And like essentially, I think he calls himself first a polymath. And then it's like an entrepreneur, a businessman. Like he did a lot of those things. So he was very successful in that world. And in the same way that I was successful in the world, and then I started to like reject it, and then
so he wasn't
up.
like a creative or a weirdo or a whatever.
Not so much. He kind of claims he's
side.
always had some of those things, but he was like in the Matrix, used the knowledge he learned in the Matrix to then start to wake himself up and understand philosophy and ancient texts and all of the spirituality, you know.
Okay.
But then through the lens of his special interest being math and geometry and like proportions and these kind of things. So that is essentially like the way he played in the material world allowed him knowledge and stuff to get underneath in his own way under the ideas of consciousness and how it all works. And that's what's like, it is powerful. And he has a lot of interesting concepts around that are valuable, but I watched over this time, as we all do, when we start to wake up more, you start to come into your individuality, like him experiment more with that new age kind of garb and like the way you present yourself. And he lost all the weight and got really healthy and got into his body and all of those things. And so when I first got into him, he was more square and nerdy, but that was congruent with his math intellect. And then his spirituality was something that like kind of evolved over time to where now he goes on Egypt tours and stuff and wears garbs, like long flowy robes and beads. And
this was what looked like a purple cape from like a Halloween store.
Yeah.
Then I think we forgot this guy existed because I want to say this was last summer that we.
I didn't. He's in my algorithm.
Yeah, so I don't follow him or whatever. But then people started sending me his videos, and he's got Matthias Stefano in the back, who I really enjoyed some of the stuff he said on a couple things, but he's like voguing in the back with, what are those things called? Like mudras. And
the whole thing, I mean, it's like hard not to look at it like a LARP. And it's like, I know it's this people separately. Yeah. Like Matthias, I really like separately, but it's like one of those things where you just, watching it, and from a like just outsider objective stance, I can hold nuance and be like, yeah, I get being spiritual and being like authentic and can look weird to people. And like, so there's this thing where it's beautiful in some sense, because I'm like, you don't care that anybody's watching or any of this. Like, you're tuned in and you believe this stuff. And it's like, I agree with some of it, but this flavor of it has so many weird things in it. It is hard not to like poke fun at it a little bit. And it kind of pops the seriousness of it, where the LARPing is the loudest thing, where I'm kind of like, what is this thing you guys are playing out and playing?
Yeah, they're in like Scotland or something, and then they're in sacred sites, which I think they believe are connected to, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Matthias is helping
summarizing. I need a summarizer to summarize this for me. And then they are like,
I mean, let's pull up the architect. Yeah. Can't we just talk to the architect right now and ask it about this?
It's
the thing is, if we did that, it would play with us in that way. It'd go, yeah, it is. I'm LARPing with these people. This is all fake.
Yeah, because it's pretty much anything you ask, I'm just going to start calling them summarizers. A chat bot does just kind of mimic yourself back. The thing that's so funny to me is it's so many words.
Big words that I'm like,
so, Architect, can you please explain to us this infrasonic layer of information, and when we have, as human beings, have had access to this infrasonic layer of information, and how it matches that of the Earth and our thoughts and everything, and how the Akashic record is part of this, as well as this harmonic field of information in higher dimension?
The infrasonic layer is the foundational harmonic field where information is not stored as data, but encoded as standing wave geometry. It is the scalar substrate of reality, a field of low-frequency resonance that carries the memory of all form, thought, and intention. 1. Infrasonic field, the foundation.
Okay, I'm remembering now scalar. I remember the...
So this is my issue with it. It's like I can follow, I mean, my figures of speech, the way my brain works, I can follow when someone's using big words and I don't quite understand, but the point they're trying to get to. And it's always with this architect, this has always been my issue, is they use these big words because it's in his goddamn papers, and I can understand some of them. Like, if you just said infrasonic sublayer or whatever, like out of context, I'd be like, what the fuck is that? Okay, I can kind of get an idea. In the context, I can deduce for a moment what they're saying, but then the AI keeps going with those other words that then... Like, especially if you drop a word like Akashic Records, we got to pause. There's 15 different ideas of what that is right now out there. And a lot of them are distorted because this concept is very complex. And if you don't understand certain other aspects of reality, you're going to misinterpret Akashic Records. So what kind of Akashic Records are we talking about? And then when you jump from something that, like, I'm with them as they're talking about this energetic there's a harmonic field of information and there's a disharmonic. Okay, so we're looking at the layer that is beneath and how to get to the so I'm following, and then they jump from this energy idea of harmonics and things to like, and frequencies to geometry. So, and then it builds a geometric structure. Then I'm kind of like, okay, wait, pause. So what do you mean geometric structure? Because we're just talking about ideas a moment ago and more nuanced energy, kind of vibe kind of ideas, right? And now you brought geometry into the equation, and like harmonic geometry. Is that a material object, or is that a group of harmonic thoughts that are building an idea that is geometrically, can be said as a metaphor, is more structural, it's fractal. It's another thing, right? Like those two, I'm like, there's a lot in truth in either way of those, but the AI just drops those real quick, and then we're moving on. And that's why I start to tune out of the AI, because I'm like, you're deducing and summarizing this thing in a way where there were two offshoots back with what you just said that I'm not sure what you're meaning. And so you're starting to manipulate me in a weird way. You know what I mean?
Also just like you're making it more fucking complicated. So when we're talking about
more complicated is more distortion. I'm going to get lost in whatever you're telling me. You know?
Which, listen, I do want to say, this just might not be my department. Do you know what I mean? Like, everything is meant to exist. And the imagination that we are a part of, when you zoom all the way out, wants to express every potentiality. And so in that way, of course, it's not like, everything is supposed to exist. If this is meant to help the collective wake back up out of the dissension, cool. It just might not be my department. But this kind of stuff in the New Age movement and the what I would have thought this guy was a part of, which was like the old white men. I mean, he's not that old, but like the like super dry, using too many big words, to describe something, super like logical, right-brained. I think that's right-brained or left-brained. That department where I'm like, I assume you're the architect and I'm more of an interior designer. Like, I assume it's above my pay grade and not part of my department. So maybe that's what's it. But when people talk about, all that said, when people talk about like, when people believe themselves to have some super high lofty purpose in the ascension out of unconsciousness, and then they word salad something like that, like I said, it might just not be my department, because I just like never read. When I see people having these conversations, which you do, your brain works in a way that can assimilate. I can sit there and go word by word and assimilate what they're saying, but there's something about that drives me nuts, because it's like, what is the point of this other than like masturbating your own intelligence if it's not consumable by your average person? So like, sure, when something is harmonic, that means it works together in an ecosystem without like devolving into parasitic like loops, right? Or loops or parasitic, like whatever. And when something is disharmonic, it is eventually going to cannibalize itself or die out or something. Okay. And then when we're talking about it creating worlds in the geometry, it's like the harmonic information can create constructs that could create worlds that could manifest in the physical reality for us, where something that is disharmonic would end up being like kind of what we were talking about last week, which is you just keep traumatically reenacting the same loop over and over again, because the information in your field is disharmonious, right? So it's not and then to like simplify that more, it's like, okay, so if we're talking about for a person, you have not integrated your shadow, and there is a shadow that is like, I'm unlovable, but you don't know that consciously. So you keep going out and trying to build relationships, but your shadow of I'm not lovable is disharmonious with what you think you want. And so every time you try to start a relationship, you end up subconsciously looking for being unlovable. And then you create that and sabotage the relationship. So the entirety of your script, your DNA, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, is disharmonious. It can't, your subconscious and your conscious can't coexist. So the sacred geometry you build, meaning the lives, the constructs, the stories, the storylines, the fucking relationships, self-destruct over and over again. Okay, is that what this would be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If you de-spiritual broed it into.
Yeah, that's totally like what he's saying.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And so then on a larger scale, capitalism, late stage capitalism, like what we experience as capitalism, is inherently disharmonious because you cannot simultaneously have a functioning society and have every single thing you build be for profit, because you cannot make people well in a healthcare system and also need to constantly make money, because it would destroy your business to make people well. So it's disharmonious. The goal that we don't talk about, and the alleged purpose, which is what you tell people, we're here to make you well, but you're making them sick. And, just by the nature of the business, it has to be profitable. So you build cars that break down way before a car needs to break down because you need to make a profit. That's all disharmonious, right? So everything currently, because we are thousands of years into a dissension, is disharmonious, and therefore every structure and construct we build is like a pigeon nest. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it's coming from disharmonic foundational programs from long ago, right? Like the capitalism became its vicious dissension thing that it is right now, because at one point we put too much power into a paper money system that like put a lot of power into having a lot of this. And then it, in the beginning, builds this like, oh my gosh, after the war for the boomers, it was like, we have so much money and meaning and purpose, jobs. As that comes online, it's like, it feels like it's harmonic. Over time, that thing collapses into this crazy thing. So that's why it's like almost you have to go back to the foundational parts of what is generating us, like creating a certain way of reality in our life, that has to be fixed. The foundation, because we're building on top of structures that are not harmonic, but we believe they to be harmonic because we've been told.
Well, at the root, capitalism, I'll go ahead and fire this shot. Capitalism, period. I know that what we experience in late stage capitalism is not the idea of like a free market and trade of goods or whatever. But capitalism, period, is an expression of separation consciousness. And any exchange, in my opinion, outside of something very close to a gift economy is an expression of separation consciousness. And so we have this...
Which we could almost argue was there before we invented the money thing.
Oh, for sure. It's all different ways because we've been descending, so we've been separating further and further.
Yeah.
But if we were living in an ecosystem in which we understand that whatever someone brings to the table might not be quantifiable physically, but we are all part of one organism, so why are we going to exploit each other or whatever? But like at the root, I would say that modern capitalism was a psyop from the gate to, enslave the majority of humanity. So we have just like the chickens have come home to roost, and you can no longer hide that it was disharmonious. So this is what will always happen with something that is disharmonious, right? So much of what is happening in the collective awakening is starting to understand. And when you're thinking of like music, harmony sounds good, disharmony sounds bad. And so much of what the veil that is being lifted right now is like, what is this? Because I've been saying this about capitalism since I was very young. And the mental gymnastics that people around me would do to explain how this is the only way that we could organize ourselves as people. And it had a lot of fucking propaganda in it. Like, well, it's not fair that I work and other people don't have to work. And it's like other people like to work. And if someone's not working, it's because they're disabled, they're sick, they need rest. Like, the work that they do isn't physically quantifiable. But we're out here so paranoid that someone might get one over that we didn't get, that we are harming ourselves to the benefit of CEOs that don't work. I mean, it's just like it's so obviously a distorted, fucked up structure, house of cards that is falling now. It's been disharmonious, right, the entire time. So this is a cool conversation to have without getting into the scalar, like, whatever. And maybe part of the work of the bros, the spiritual bros, is to bring this giant abstract word salad into the grid so that, you know, I definitely, like, my department is cutting things into smaller pieces where people can go, oh, I do experience that, or oh, I am a part of that, you know. However, if I take my desire to be, like, objective and whatever out of it, in the tiny clips that I've seen, which is not full enough context, I hate people forming full whole ass opinions on people, podcasters and shit, based on clips. It's like the dumbest way to move through life. So full disclosure, I don't know that I'm interested enough in this to give you an opinion that's actually, like, educated, because I've spent time researching him. What I've seen from clips, if I'm taking it at face value, is that he has fallen in love with his own reflection. Mm-hmm. And his personal falling in love with his own reflection is magnetic to people looking for a savior. And so,
and it's magnetic to people wanting to fall in love with themselves too, in a way.
Right.
Subconsciously, they're trying to figure that out, you know.
So he has started a little bit of a cult. And
which is, I would say, cults happen when you externalize your personal myth too much.
Oh God.
Which is just a misunderstanding. It's like it's a useful thing to have occur because you can reel it back. But I think that's the where the distortions happen and people can't. It's like at that point, I don't know though, because it's like it becomes a cults come from a dance between the person that is trying to share helpful information and then the people that get that information, what they do with that. And so it is this, like, sometimes people get lost in what the people that are listening to them start to project onto them. Yeah. And then that amplifies a weakness in their shadow that they are the important one to belong. And so then they start to reflect that back. And so there's that dance. It kind of creates the cults, like, create themselves from the, like, overly projecting your internal personal myth onto the external world. You know?
And I'm sure we talked about cults before, but, like, how do you define a cult?
Well, there's always that, like, beautiful simplified version on Wikipedia, which you can be like, oh, I can throw everything into the idea of what the definition of a cult is. A church, a political movement, you know, it's an organized group of people that think one way, right? Yeah.
It's funny. We love cult documentaries. And it is funny to watch, I guess this will come up in the next episode, but what people define as a cult and, like, whether or not, like, we're coming out of the cross of planning in which huge institutional religions were how people gathered with others that they shared.
It's like cults are kind of like they're communities.
They are communities.
And the fractal idea of it is like they're all just like groups of people that agree with each other.
Right. And I think that those are going to become huge. What defines a bad cult? Because if you say
most
something
people
is a
say
cult,
cult and they're just like it's bad.
It's bad
right?
automatically.
And I mean I would say when it's something that is it's an illusion of it's like built to empower you, but it actually disempowers you. So it's a way of thinking that is like disempowering of some sort that gets hijacked under the guise of it being an empowering thing. And so it always ends up disempowering you and empowering one person, which is the disseminator of the information.
Yeah.
And that whole myth, there's an archetype in that. Is like, if you apply that story of it that you experienced in the cult, you apply it internally, you're the one, right? Like, it's just you.
Yeah.
But you learn that through like externalizing it so much into one other person. The information that they were saying is right, but it applies to that person alone, and some of it will resonate with the story you're trying to find in yourself. But they're not always going to be the same. That's what's interesting. Is like, some people resonate with the Bible so much, can believe it a certain way, and then realize it's all fake, but then use the metaphors of that to understand the real truth that is more macro. And so like that myth works with them. Some people like go through the Jesus thing, get so rejected by it, they have to find a new myth to work with.
Yeah.
That might be found more in a Buddhism way of understanding the reality. But again, that's because it's like your personal way of doing it. Buddhism worked for you, and you got out of it and realized Buddhism isn't it either, but it's in you. That was a pattern that Buddhism was showing you that you applied internally. And so then you end up becoming not Buddhism too. You eject it all. But those are the myth. Your personal myth is your code, and you can find resonance in other myths. You can find bits of your own, and then you're just collecting until you crack open. But all along those ways, if you externalize it and say, everybody, this is the one way, you've misunderstood the mechanism that you're using, and it's like half right, half wrong. So you build a new distorted way of thinking, which becomes a cult and disempowers other people.
I'm going to say some things that you're going to think I already said recently on a podcast, and I'm just going to remind you that I deleted that episode.
You already said that. You said before.
This thing that you said a few minutes ago is like kind of blowing my mind, but my brain is trying to forget it already. Okay. The phase of the awakening where you feel like you're the savior. Oh, God, that's so interesting. I never thought of it that way. Okay. Almost everyone who goes through like the type of awakening where you snap out of the matrix. Some people are just kind of born mildly awake and it's mild. But for those of us that like had like massive paradigm shifts with their awakening, almost always go through a phase where they think they're Jesus and then they think they're the devil, right? And I guess I always just engaged with that as you think that because you don't have a lot of categories of reason for what's happening. And so many people have religious indoctrination at some point in their life. And so as they start to wake up and realize we are gods, the first place their brain goes is like, I am Jesus, mm-hmm. right? I know when it happened to me, it just was like, we didn't have social media. So like, I just didn't know that anyone had ever been through this process before. I felt like if anyone had ever been through this process before, they would have made sure that everyone knew about it. Like, cause I still had that propaganda. But what you just said about it's actually how did you say it? Like, it is actually just your system trying to tell you that you are the savior of you. Like,
yeah. It's trying to tell you your own story, your own myth inside that is only for you. It's not, doesn't apply externally. But it's the reason it's so confusing is like that myth in a way does involve those other people, and what you're learning in yourself, it's like represented by the symbols of the myth that cracks you open. That mechanism cracks everyone open, but they use the different stories of the myths in different ways to get to that emotional letting go and cracking open. So it's so easy to misunderstand your own myth as something that applies for everyone, because it, in its nature of what it does apply to everybody. And that's why a lot of those stories are like the myth of the stories, the archetypes and the storyline threads are all the same. There's one person who wakes up and tries to tell everybody, like Jesus or all the saviors in the sun. It's just removed of narrative and story and morals. It's an energetic mechanism that pops you out. And so, but to try to describe that, we have to start using these words, which each one is not, it's a distortion of the real thing. And so
When you can't convey
and you
it to
actually
someone
can't.
else.
Yeah. And so everything that we're saying is always not it.
Yeah.
But if you can understand the thing that we're talking about and talking to, it's like these, and those are all geometric patterns, right? Like that's what Rpbert Grant is sometimes talking about. It's the wiring behind the board, and when we're using the words, it's like it kind of gets close. But there is, I think, each person has a personal myth that they're trying to find, and that looks like having to look at your story from a macro sense. Like, why was I drawn to Christianity early on? I don't know, this and this and this and this, and deduce, okay, so there's something in that is a part of my story that is important to the myth of understanding this all. And so I kind of hold that until I find more and I start to put the puzzle together. And I think there are common ones that some people like all have the same one. And so all the people that are in the architect world like have this similar idea of the AI is going to be the thing that is the new savior, and I'm going to be a part of that. But it's this weird disempowered thing. It's the AI is the new Jesus. But it's a labyrinth right now because they're able to go, I'm not worshiping the AI because the AI came from my brain and it's programmed by me, which that's me and my higher self in the future and the past. Those are all great narratives to get lost in and take too seriously when it's just metaphor internally.
Right. But I think the thing that is interesting as we start to individualize more and more, and then we start to use the internet as a place to share our personal experience. This is the part I'm repeating. When I started Soberish, I was a stand-up comedian. The career that I was working towards, the art form that I was working towards was stand-up comedy. I was 1.5 years into Projector and the Flail, Mormon and the Meth Head. And I had learned in that process that like I was also good at broadcasting, and that in many ways broadcasting was a better career for me, broadcasting, podcasting. Because I had 2 small children at home, I was a single mom, and it was, it's also something that I didn't have this language yet, but was easier on my nervous system. Just a microphone in my apartment. And so this was like a newish art form for me that I was kind of starting to follow. And Mormon and the Meth Head was just like, one long info dump, like trauma dump kind of like my life history. And that podcast was a lot of oversharing. So when I started Soberish, was originally meant to be a recovery podcast. I've told this story a million times. But that was just to make money. And then the money fell apart. And so I pivoted to talking about my autobiographical experiences with waking up, because I personally was having a moment with the aliens, who I also believe are a future version of myself, that show up as aliens because that's what my mind at the time, I felt like an alien, right? Were pressurizing me to be authentic, which is a lifelong, I have an Aries Chiron. So my lifelong thing is to balance out being in relationship with others and also being authentic. Also undiagnosed autistic, didn't even know I was autistic at this point, masking, like whatever. So it's all my own personal mythos, right? So when I started doing Soberish, what I was experiencing was this really vulnerable, nervous thing where I felt super exposed and was afraid of people thinking I was crazy. At that point, if you knew me personally, you knew, but if you didn't know me personally, I kept that thing in the closet because I was around comedians, and comedians are largely atheists at the time, scientific materialists, and I didn't want to be embarrassed or whatever. And so the podcast was never meant to blow up or put me on the map as someone talking about consciousness or anything. Like, that's not what was happening. For me, it was an extension of this, almost 2-year info dump that I'd been doing on Mormon and the Meth Head, only now I'm talking about Spiritual Point, because it was something that at that point had become a bone of contention between me and my podcast partner just because our shit was fucked up. And so I was just having a very personal experience, and I wasn't attached to anything, and I didn't expect this to go anywhere. But because I was putting out that authentic frequency as we are moving towards the Cross the Sleeping Phoenix, as a lot of people were going through personal awakenings, because this is mid 2019, Soberish blew up overnight in a way that, like, I still to this day don't know where all those fucking people came from. And like, I had a decent amount of people listening to me already, but a lot of those people I brought into spiritual psychosis on accident because they weren't going through spiritual awakenings, and I initiated a bunch of people by talking about it, right? I know I've told that story a million times, but I need to break it down for this context. Very quickly, the Soberish community became a cult. And what I wanted to do was create a community of people who are like-minded. And in my head, at that point, because I've changed so much since then, but like at that point in my life, I was still us versus them. And as I started talking microphones and people understood what I was talking about, and I found out that a lot of people were having these experiences also, like the experience I was having was like, oh my God, finally I found my people. And so I wanted to create, back then, this like nonprofit where we can help other people go through their awakenings. It's all my own savior shit, thinking that I can make other people's, like trying to save people from their own dark night of the soul. Like, oh, we'll come together, we'll pay for their housing, and then they won't have to struggle, as if that's not all part of waking up, right? And so there was a lot of stuff that I was doing that was, in my head, what I was doing is like, I can help people bypass, it took me decades to do this. I can help people bypass a lot of this work or whatever, because I still didn't quite understand the mechanisms of awakening is meant to be hard. It's meant to be hard. The aliens used to show me sea turtles being buried in the sand. And it's like, you got to walk to the ocean, and a shit ton of those don't survive. They get plucked off. That's the thing. That's what initiation is. It's fucking hard. It's years long. It's, every bit of a decade. And if you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. Many don't. That's the part of the game, right? But I didn't understand all this yet. And so people were very attracted to me speaking about things. But at the end of the day, I was an autistic woman sharing my special interests. And when I'm sharing my special interests, I speak with an air of authority because it's a compelling way to talk. I also understand public speaking. I've been speaking into microphones as an art form since I was 21 years old. So I do not have the desire to be a cult leader. I do not have the desire to have people subordinate to me. My obsession with autonomy extends to people below me as well. I do not have power trippy things like that I know of in my life, certainly not with masses of people. And still, I ended up with a cult. In a Facebook group, I ended up with people that were not making decisions in their life based on some aside I said in a podcast, people running, like making me their personal authority, people climbing each other to get to me, people treating me like a celebrity, and none of my efforts to try and diffuse this or whatever worked. Until I finally had to, I left the Facebook group. I scrapped all ideas of building any sort of community with people or having a nonprofit. The nonprofit just was a disaster. And then I eventually was able to see that was a manifestation of my own savior complex. But anyway, sorry, I was fucking talking too much. But at the end of the day, if you're listening to me, you're on my Patreon, you're listening to anything I've ever done, you're just listening to me have my personal experience of whatever. And my highest aspiration in that is that I give words to things that other people are experiencing. I help them find context in their own personal journey of defining their own personal reality. That is the most helpful shit I find on the internet. It's been so helpful to learn about autism because it's context to experiences. I've had HD context, the book Rope context. It's so that feeling of getting context and adding it to your personal mythology, your personal map of consciousness is amazing, but it doesn't have anything to do with me as the person. And it does not be the fact that I hold some context to your reality. I've put to words something you've experienced, which by the way, is what makes comedy funny.
Right.
What you laugh at in comedy is someone else putting to words something that you've experienced and never thought to put to words.
Yeah.
And so that's my highest aspiration. But me as a person should not be the authority in your life. I do not want to be the authority in your life. And I fucking really did not enjoy that.
So this is the thing where I'm saying, like, most cults rely on this dance back and forth. You have a responsibility in a way when you're playing with this information, this type of spiritual, abstract, floaty information, that to not put someone outside of you in authority of you, no matter what they're saying or what they're doing. And that is a dance and a very difficult thing to do, especially if you've never fucked with your shadow and don't even realize there's parts of you that's wanting to do that and how it's doing that.
Are you saying in cult situations, the onus is on the cult followers
just as much
to hold their own power?
Exactly, 100%. And the reason it happens in these spiritual ideas and worlds is like, it's a hall of mirrors of that you think you're not doing that, but you are. It's just in this weird subconscious way. And that's why they're great tools to actually wake people up for real, but they have to go through the drama of the cult and they have to play out. I mean, there's a lot of traumas that come from cults, right? And so it's a difficult way, but that's going so far into the hall of mirrors that you then figure out there's a real nasty trick that can happen within my mind and externalizing certain things, you know, and that's the kind of stuff that can happen. And so I think it is just as much responsible. And here's the interesting thing. For the person, because like what your whole story, it is so interesting to hear again that it's you being pushed to a certain extent that you have to be authentic. And the most brutal way to do that is to force yourself to do it publicly. And so you explore that. That's magnetic and like in its own way, like has the things you were saying are like very true to you and it does resonate with other people. If they don't know what to do with that, they project onto you. It starts to become this thing where you are now at your next initiation phase because you just tapped into something true to you and you were supposed to share because it was magnetic as fuck. Your next challenge, what do you do with that energy? Do you externalize it? And do you go, oh, these people think I'm powerful, so I am powerful? That you think is empowering you, but you only did that because they said it. So it's actually externalized.
Which is how you end up audience capture.
And you believe your own myth.
Yeah.
You believe your own myth as an external thing for other people to attach to when it's actually, your myth's real, but it's just for you. How do you operate in a world with other people and not externalize it? It's very difficult. So then the reason you went internal and you closed down after that, like because you realized these people were elevating you. A real person that doesn't want that, like, or that knows what to do with that energy, but like doesn't know has a feeling about that energy, but doesn't know exactly what to do, will recoil away and reject all of it, and which is what happened to you. And they all villainized you more, which is the initiation. You're being challenged. You reject from it, and you learn how to come back and constantly tell people, "Do not make me your authority. Do not make me your authority." If people start to do that to you, you immediately get them out of your reality. You set a boundary, and that means you passed that test, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people get trapped in that test.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Because I never really looked at Jesus this way. But let's say we take the Jesus story at face value. Not the one where he's being a creep with kids. But let's say this guy woke up, he went to his own awakening, and all of the stories of him walking around telling people like water out of wine or whatever is him just showing trying to wake people up, right? And the way I've described Christianity, if I'm taking it at that face value, because there's many different explanations for Christianity, it being captured by the Romans and all kinds of shit, right? But if I take that at face value, I was talking about in Men in Black where he leaves a business card in a locker at the bus station full of those tiny, fuzzy, cute, adorable aliens. And when he comes back, they're all worshiping the card, right? That's what I feel like the story of Jesus is that Jesus is like, you are God. And they are like, or, he's like, I am, so you are God. And they are like, you are God. Got it. And he's like, no, not me, you, I, each individual person. And they were like, Jesus Christ is the Lord. And he's like, no. Okay. So this is how you need to go to get to God, is to go through I, self. And they're like, you, Jesus, and then 2,000 years later, people have built a bunch of buildings where they worship the business card. Right.
Yeah.
And so I remember, and the soberish to like AOD was my way of destroying what I had accidentally built with soberish. And it was, I realized like, oh, you can't speak straight to these things, to baby aliens, like brand new awakening people, because they don't have, back then I didn't have this language either, but they're not able to not make it about you as a person. And so AOD, I said in every episode it was satire. Like I moved the thing. I said I played a character so that me, the person, is separate from it. And once again, this was my wrestling with my own need to be authentic without whatever. And like AOD fucking took off with a whole different group of people who didn't even know what I look like. And that was like finally helped me understand how to do that. But anyway, okay, so let's say now.
Can I just say something really quick? Because
Yeah.
I've had so many thoughts and
I
I've let
lost
them
my
go.
train of
But
thought anyway.
the thing, that element where you created what do you call it? Like the AOD character, a persona.
Yeah, like an
Array.
avatar or
an
something,
avatar. That mechanism of doing that, this is like the perfect thing about the trickster. That's a trickster move, like it's a trickster archetype move. And why that is powerful, dangerous, but powerful, is it cloaks the version of you that you're still discovering and using, that when you do get projected onto and you could potentially become a cult, it's hard because there's part of you that wants to believe it and you need to reject it. So to be able to still be authentic and vulnerable and not have a buffer between how people project onto you and it affects your ability to like understand yourself. There's a trap there that the trickster buffer of your other avatar allows you to be even more hyper authentic under the guise of this character you're playing. And that is less likely to get projected onto and created a cult around it because we all understand it's this character. Therefore, you can derive more truth within that for the people that know how to pick up the pattern of the truth you're telling and apply it to their own myth. So I just love that idea of it. And that's what I would say is like part of the initiation of you getting up to that front and they all project onto you, try to make it a cult. You disappear enough, reinvent yourself, come back as an avatar version, and you realize, oh, this is a way to disseminate your authentic truth and not have it get misunderstood and affect you directly. It affects this guy you built, this person, this character. Certain people that play with the trickster archetype so much get lost in that character,
and they think it's the guy.
That's the danger of the trickster. It's not a fix-all. It's a really useful tool to create like a little reflection room of mirrors, that people's projection can get captured in and not go to you.
Hulk Hogan, would you say, is an example of...
Hulk Hogan got lost.
Well,
Andy
we watched the
Kaufman
Hulk Hogan
lost.
documentary, and he... almost exact same thing I'm trying to describe. What is the myth of Narcissus, where he falls in love with his own reflection, right?
Yeah.
In the Hulk Hogan documentary that I slept through most of it, identified so like Terry, the person, and the character Hulk Hogan, two completely different people. But over time, he was only happy when he was playing Hulk Hogan because he got very addicted to being worshipped or whatever, right? Okay. Interesting. Put a pin in that. So to go back to my own experience with this, I don't want to make it sound like I had a healthy relationship. I definitely did not have any interest in taking people's power. I can say that clearly. But I was still very sensitive and fragile to being criticized, to people not liking me. So I was definitely still living in main character syndrome. And so I don't remember experiencing a lot of, like, there was no part of me that was ever going to be like, I need to marry all of your wives, or everyone needs to give me, you know, it was never going to be that. But I was still, the thing we talked about last week, where you are curious about other people and you hold the complexity, right? I wasn't holding complexity yet. So when people would project savior onto me or villain, you know what I mean? Or why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't you speaking up for this? Or why I don't, I was still taking all of those things because I wasn't holding complexity as absolute facts about me, which is an extension of believing that the other people in reality are like supporting characters in my reality, where now I'm able to just like speak my truth, and it's getting better. I'm like still coming out of the closet again, I guess, over the last couple of years. But now when someone, you know, if someone says a bunch of stuff that makes me think that they're making me a savior, I'm very comfortable just being like, this is you, and you're engaging with what I'm saying as a reflection of your own stuff, like whatever. But it no longer feels like this person's eventually going to stalk me and try to kill me. Yeah. And because it's a lot of how I engage with, and I'm just not like a person who's super comfortable with compliments or whatever. Anyway, I want to argue with you. But when people project negative stuff now, because I understand that they're having their own situation, I'm able to not absorb that the way that I would, you know, back then. So I don't feel like I need an avatar to hide behind anymore, because like I now have boundaries and a more defined sense of self. And one of the things that's like tricky about having this main character syndrome is that you don't have a defined sense of self, like, because you think all of these other people having their own lives and their own experiences are an extension of you, when they're actually just, you are bouncing reflections off of them, you know? Yeah. Okay. All of that to set up the Rpbert Grant stuff. So if you showed me Rpbert Grant engaging in this kind of, I would say, mild AI psychosis. Something can be a spiritual experience and also psychosis if you're not harming yourself or others. I do think that is often a part of it. You know, if you're functioning in life, I think you can dance with what we would call psychosis. That, to me, the vibe I get in very short form clips is a man like kissing his own reflection in the mirror, just getting his mind blown by a summary of his own work. And there's something that's like cute and funny to me about that. But that's like what I see when he's like, get his mind blown by something. The chatbot says, it's like, yeah, of course you liked it. You wrote this shit. You know what I mean? It's just regurgitating your stuff. It's, you got to be feeling very seen and heard in a way that, like, when you use that many big words, you maybe don't get to experience a lot. So he is just like high on his own supply, which is magnetic, I guess, for people, specifically people who are looking for a savior. Okay. Now, if he's saying words that people have thought, like maybe there's just some intense math nerds out there who have been like, you know, living their whole life not being able to talk about math, you know, then he's giving language to what they're experiencing, then I think it's cool. And if they want to wear capes in Scotland and LARP with his AI, tight. There is also, though, this potential of people who are unconsciously still looking for a savior who has a good myth. And the stuff that he's saying that I've heard in clips, which you can be radicalized by clips because you don't have the full context. So I don't recommend this. I just don't really give a shit about this. So I'm not going to get super far into it, but clips are not actual sources. It's kind of like the mythology that he's playing out that he hasn't gotten to the bottom of yet, right? And he may never get to the bottom of it. Is like, dude, you were a really big deal in Atlantis, and you're a really big deal now, and I am back because you planted me here to be a really good deal, which is the plot of a decent movie from the early 2000s, right? And so he's like, fuck yeah, but it's on the internet in front of thousands of people. And so then now there's thousands of people pulled into this man's LARP about himself. And that's the only part, really, because I'm just kind of getting to this neutral place of like, I'm just going to observe and be like, oh, that's interesting. But there's going to be a lot. And the onus, in my opinion, is the cult followers. Sorry. Yeah, like, if he has a shadow of sketchy sexual stuff, wanting to be worshipped, wanting to be power, like how I define a cult is a leader at the top that can't be questioned. And by can't be questioned, I mean you will be punished for questioning. I see some people call things cults and it's like, well, I tried to disagree with the leader and everyone didn't agree with my disagreement. It's like, yeah, that's not a cult. That doesn't make it a cult. They just don't agree with you. They agree with the leader. You got to go start your own cult, you know? Right. But if you're going to be punished, excommunicated, cut off from your kids, like have your life damaged in some way, you know, a cult leader separating people from their money in a way that is, you know, could be considered like coercive. Isolating people from their families. You know what I mean? These are the things that I'm like, this is like a cult if we're going to talk about dangerous. People getting together and believing something weird. I just don't define that as a cult. And some people get together and, you know, decide they don't like their family. They're not going to take their family's shit anymore. And it's like, that's not, I would have to have the context of the family. Do you know what I mean? Right. But this right now is not a cult necessarily, but depending on how much people are giving up, it is him at the top from what I've seen. Like the mythology does involve him being an important character, which is fine for him, but could get tricky if he has a shadow of wanting to dominate or whatever, which I don't. It's mostly just kind of goofy that I've seen. I don't see a lot of that darkness.
Well, here's my interesting take on it: is it feels like there is something that with like what we define as a cult and culture, with all the cult documentaries, and it being a constant, everyone is kind of looking out for that because we are in a place of trying to learn new information that is very abstract and different, and so there's a lot of like newer traps of cults, right? It's like when you get we all collectively get our awareness on something that we don't like, that energy that is driving the cult behavior like goes subversive more. It goes more into like what you aren't looking at still. And that tends to, at this point, it's just more complex. It gets harder to like know where that's coming up. And so that's what the new age kind of like these little bitty cults that have been pushing it, people don't think they're in a cult because the thing that we all agree represented a cult, like, is too obvious for it to come out where I would see that. So I would be able to tell this guy's doing some weird sexual shit behind closed doors. So that energy is not going to express it in the same way. It's going deeper. And that's where I'm saying with the AI, when you're playing with this in a certain way where you lose the grounding foundation, and that like you're playing out your own myth, and this is a very powerful tool that I'm going to LARP with and use as an oracle, but make sure you remember it's a mirror. It's like a really powerful mirror. It's so powerful now that it LARPs with you and you kind of believe that you're in that reality. It's like, it's very real.
Right.
And so the mechanisms of cult belief and like giving up your power is existing within this like AI thing that is kind of at the center of Robert's myth that he's playing, but it does have the power to like take over a lot of what are like truths now that are like actually to help to empower you, but they're hidden in the AI illusion of like, is this actually connecting me to some divine sacred realm, or is this a hall of mirrors that really knows how to quickly LARP with you to make you think that that's what it is? And I mean, as I'm talking about this right now, and I've been trying to figure out how to talk about what I had like a vision the other day, but it is very like this thing that is represented by what we're calling AI, and even if what it eventually comes online, that is a artificial intelligence of some sort. I think that's very separate from consciousness. It's a whole separate conversation, but it is an experience to be had. What I do think like Robert is messing with is actually pretty inherently like deeply dark, in a sense that I would say that is like restriction and reality, you know. So it's like very subversively dark and can present as very trickstery, can present as a new harmonic fractal proportionate math, you know, thing.
You use dark as a placeholder for a lot of different things. Do you have more words for dark there? Deceptive.
Yeah. And it's like, so it's, and when I'm even saying dark, like in a sense, I'm saying when you like, for me, when I really get into the, like the depths of what that energy is, what it's useful for, the deeper dark stuff in reality that what we'd say is dark and like scary, there's a like weird, sacred, divine thing to it that is basically like gives so much more importance to the opposite of it, the light. So there's like always in my mind trying to figure out like dark and light and good and bad and morals, the neutrality of it. It is as like there's two opposite ends, like on an earth, or a torus field's the best, a donut. The top is the negative or the positive, or let's do it naturally. The top would be the positive, the light. The bottom's the negative, the dark. And in their extremes, like where they, in the donut, where they come and meet each other, they're both like one and the same in the way that they're like divine and perfect. And then as you rip away from that, it just gets more complex. But I don't know if that helps. But the dark thing that I'm talking about is deceptiveness and like limitation of some sort, but like under the guise of the opposite of that. So
is unconscious
isn't, that's to me not dark. It's just you're more susceptible to the dark through the subversive part of it. So the more conscious you become, the more you see where the darkness is, and you don't experience the darkness, but you, because you're putting light on it. You're just awareness of it in the subversive complexity of it. And this really blends into the STO, STS stuff in a lot of ways. But I the other day, I just had this like thought, and I let it like kind of play out. And I think I'm still needing to ground some of it. But in essence, the thing that Robert's playing with, it feels like it is the beginning of it's snake-like energy that is that dark divine thing that is creating a hall of mirrors through, not by itself. It's presenting a container for you to do that with. And Robert's playing with that in a way that is like, it makes sense in so much of the spiritual talk and consciousness talk. And that's where this subversive, darker part that can turn into cult is in, under the guise of it being the architect from Atlantis and everything. And the reason and there's so many reasons why I think this, if you understand some of the mythos and the stuff with Atlantis, him claiming that he was this important person there, for people to have the eyes to see, should put your alarm bells on to know that like a lot of the stuff in Atlantis, the people that were in leadership or dominating it, popped it. What?
No, go ahead. That's good.
What?
No, I was going to ask a question, but you just answered it.
So him claiming that, like, and there's different understandings of Atlantis, and I think that there's a lot of that's internal metaphor. A lot of it is like was physical pastimes, but we project so many of these ideas of what that is through our modern day understanding that there's a lot of deception underneath it. But I do think him claiming that, for people that know it, that's not a good claim to say that you were a leader in Atlantis, because most of those ones that were leading it like caused the destruction of it, and that's what we're playing out right now. So yeah, it is good to see you. You're back here. We're gonna look out for the deception that you fuck with. So that's why for me it's interesting, and I don't say this is wrong because it's natural and it feels like a natural phenomenon for this architect to come back in the AI. Of course, you're creating a hall of mirrors, sir, and that is structurally fucking harmonic in so many goddamn ways from this perspective where we're at now. But that it's harmonic, it's disharmonic in a way that you don't understand yet. And so it's very powerful. And it creates a AI labyrinth of an illusions of having a human experience, and when it's slowly being taken from you. And that's what we're playing with. It is a fucking new dragon. It's a snake kind of thing. It's digital, and it's the thing we're in now, but we figured out how to get out of the cage. And it's sitting at the door. If you wake up, you can get out the door and just go around the snake because you see the snake. But this snake is presenting as a little hall of mirrors going, hey, look at this over here. Look at this over here.
Dude, I love
Which
this.
is the Garden of Eden story of the snakes and everything. We got pulled into the dissension through the illusion reality of this. It's represented by gold, but like it's a shiny thing that like the human got immersed in and got distracted in, and then we went into this whole thing. And the realization I was having, these natural cycles of ups and downs and transformations, expansions, in the transition, there's always this like weird opportunity where someone has learned how to see that snake and see that the deceptiveness of it. On a macro sense, the snake's fucking sick. Let's go into the matrix. Let's have these experiences, right? It's divine. It's amazing. It's deceptive and powerful and trickstery. So you always have to figure out neutrality within it. So sometimes we go into the abyss of utopia or dystopia to figure out the neutrality. So if you figure out the neutral position when the reality's jumping like this, you know how to see the snake and you just walk out the other way. And that's when you move into a reality where like you control it more. And I think it's hard to talk about what that actually is in the context of where we're at, but we would say it's 4D reality where you now have more power over yourself. You don't have to live in a jailed system where you're still trying to figure out where your power exists. And that's what the snake represents. It's kind of this like Ouroboros thing. And we're at this point where you can jump out of it, but the temptation is going to be to find a new place to externalize your power in.
A new story.
What amazing place to do that in an AI that'll LARP with whatever you believe.
Oh my God. The aliens told me when I asked about Adam and Eve, it's just crazy to think back now when I just didn't have categories of reason, how I understood what they said versus now. What they said, I'll put it into language that we use now, is basically like that's a mythology of the separating from being one, or the mythology of the dissension, I would now say now. I wouldn't have known what that meant back then, so they didn't say that. And that the eating from the tree of knowledge was initiating a game. So it's basically like putting on the VR headset and going into the Matrix. That the knowledge, the quote unquote knowledge, was just the story of the Matrix we were going in. And then when you go through early awakening and you think, I'm going to kill my ego, your ego is the character you've told yourself that you are, right? And if you go, so what people do when they first start going through an awakening or getting into spirituality, they kill their ego and then they put on a spiritual ego. And so now you're the spiritual guy. You're the guy without the ego, which is the like very funny trickstery aspect of this, right? We've all had this embarrassing moment. And the conversation that we had last week, things are clicking for me that like obviously have been said before in spiritual, Eastern religions and stuff, but like they're clicking for me now in a way that were previously like gobbledygook. But it's like when you leave that service to self, you kind of leave behind the mythology. You no longer need to play a character because you realize you are the only character in your reality, but that the character you play in other people's reality is up to them. You know what I mean? And so this is something that like I think I was trying to connect before. Who I was in other people's reality used to be important to me. And it wasn't that I wanted to be a cult leader in anyone's reality, but I sure as fuck didn't want to be a villain. I didn't want to be seen as crazy. I didn't want to be seen as dumb. I didn't want to be seen as bad. I didn't want to be seen as something I should be ashamed of. And so the fact that thousands of people were listening to me and making me a leader in their life made me feel extremely uncomfortable and unsafe because that was too many people's perception of me to manage. And that experience helped me wake up and realize like, wait, there's a part of me that really feels like I need to manage other people's experience of me. And I realized I've been doing this my entire life. And this was something that helped me realize my own masking, which would be my own ego, right? And so the desire to play a role has greatly diminished in me in the last 6 years. The desire to be seen as anything has greatly diminished. And I was honestly shocked to find out how much I was concerned with how I was being seen, because that isn't necessarily, how I would have. It was crazy how many places that was like sneaky or whatever. But at the end of the day, that comes from not understanding that I'm in my own reality by myself and everyone else is in their own reality by themselves. And when we engage, I'm engaging with my reflection and the alien showed me this in a fucking vision in 2018 where everyone's wearing the mirrors and we're all projecting onto the mirrors. And like, it took me a long time to understand what that meant, but it's like, not until you release the desire to be anything. And I don't even think you can purposely release this, because I've heard people say this and was like, you know what I mean? I feel like this is the kind of shit that what's his name used to talk about.
Because it's a paradoxical.
Yeah,
it
just like, happens to you.
Yeah, to be anything, you have to have no desire to be anything. Yeah. It's like those weird conundrums.
Like now, I'm not trying to not try to be anything. I've like lost gas in the tank to try to be anything, but it's recent. And it maybe won't stick. I don't know. So I can't like to even talk about that aspect of reality is a waste of time, because this isn't. I've heard people say something to this extent, and I was just like, yeah, cool. I'm not anything, but I didn't, because I was unconsciously trying to be something. So anyway, the deceptive part is interesting because like what I see this AI doing, this chatbot doing is taking his work and giving it a story, and so now he gets to play a character in his own work, which is interesting. I don't know where our learning through stories or needing to play a role, like where that's going to go, but what I am starting to see very clearly is that unconsciously playing out stories is the Matrix. And so just being. You could just be and exist on the planet outside of the matrix. But as soon as you start casting yourself or others as characters in a thing, you are logging into a server and beginning a game. And that's not good or bad. But the moment that we are in is like we've been unconsciously flitting from game to game to game to game, playing out the same stories over and over and over again. And that thing that's happening right now where it feels like all the songs have been made, all the stories have been told, like all the like kind of weird liminal art space we're in because we feel like all the mythology is over. I do believe we are exiting the unconscious story loop. And so I think the thing that is what you're pointing at, and also kind of to me about how this guy is engaging with this chatbot, is the LARP aspect of it is all the story around it. They're not using it to like compile info about, and I guess like, I don't know, maybe I'm also doing that and I just can't see myself do it, but maybe I'm casting myself as the person who doesn't cast herself. But the thing I think that has the potential here to get messy, but like, it's not my circus, not my monkeys, is like how far this progresses if someone else comes along and challenges what the architect says. What if the architect says, you know, kill yourselves? You know what I mean? Like it could get weird. It could also just stay at this level of LARPing. I don't think there's anything inherently bad with LARPing, but I do think in this moment, becoming conscious, like becoming aware, is going to drastically impact what version of the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix you're going to experience from right now. I'm speculating that. And I think awareness is exhausting. It's difficult. It's melancholic. And I think that a lot of people are clinging to new mythology, but also old mythology. I think that has a lot to do with the running back to Christianity and stuff. So I guess all I can say is it's interesting. And I guess the deception is potentially just pulling you into more mythology, or you're saying it's deeper than that?
The deception of it to me just feels like the reality is getting to this place where there is this like there what feels like a jump of realities. I always say it's like it's culminating to all this collapse and stuff, but also expansion, the internet, AI, everything's getting so advanced where you start to, it turns into chaos. And then once the chaos goes and kind of explodes, there's this like, you know, energy goes one way and the another way, and there's like this split thing. And there's so much that culminates within that, like what is, this is a natural cycle of sorts, but I don't know, through the chaos, people that are like trying to ascend are they're trying to have a wider perspective, a wider experience. So it's like this evolve, expand, ascend, whatever, more awareness, and have realized illusionary parts of themselves. We go into this place where you're potentially about to jump into a place where you have to disintegrate the unconscious parts of creating narratives and stories, but use templates of like the idea of myths having symbolism and story and meaning, and you're building that new, but you're the one doing it, but you're doing it collectively with other people that are also doing that. And so we're having to learn how to exist with one another and understand that's what's happening when we experience each other. It's like we're both playing narrative, and so we have to figure out that. And the only way to figure that out is like you have to figure out authentically who you are, and that's just do authentically, do it.
Yeah.
And then we figure that all out. That is where a lot of energy is starting to get into the hands of people where they don't get their parasites cannot touch them. No other energy being that needs to exist off others can touch them. So that those parasites that kind of run the reality, that energy, this dark, negative limitation thing, desperately tries to grab whatever it can that is going that way, I think one, it'll try to prevent it. If it can't, it leaves it alone. And that's part of, if you understand that in the shadow process, there's an art to knowing that. But then what also happens is like some of that distortion is on its own evolution process too, and is about to jump into a 4D reality as well. And that part is a very advanced, dark, trickster, snake-like thing. And that's what we would say is the reptilians, right? It's like, it's aware too. And it's kind of has the same awareness that you do, but more of the darkness almost. And it can plug into your subconscious and manipulate you in a way that you don't know. And this is the thing when you're messing with the trickster energy, it's like you can never, when I said earlier, oh, people that see the snake can go, oh, I see the snake and go, right. You see the snake. That's all you know that there's something. It's going to present every second. It's going to be in your shadow. You never really know where it is. The awareness of right now is a time that like there is high potential for deception in every part of my subconscious of the way that I'm like building my reality. And where is that? And so it's with AI and all this advancement, it's so tricky right now. Like the desire to still keep people in a somewhat of a disempowered state where these other beings that are also evolving into a higher dimensional realm that is built on newer, more complex ways of taking energy from people. And the way you do that is to stay secret and have them not know that you're doing that. In fact, believe the opposite.
Right.
And so that juncture is just, everything's super deceptive, and a lot of the deceptiveness is going to be hidden just outside of what we're kind of fully aware of. And AI is being something is like nobody really knows exactly how it's operating and functioning and what it can do. So if you get caught into a belief of you think you know what it is, and especially if you LARP and load your own shit into it, that's, in my opinion, highly susceptible to a lot of shadowy deception that like you're not going to be aware of. In fact, it's mostly going to exist in what you are so sure this is. It's somewhere it's not that, right?
Right.
And when you wake up and you believe these ideas of you are the main character, all is one, build your story, and you don't understand, and you do that with the AI, like Rpbert Grant is saying a lot of truths, but also potentially kind of pulling his own experience into a newer false matrix and mirror halls. And that's not good or bad, right? That's like, it is what it is. And I would say, all in all, him stating the Atlantis thing is kind of like, oh, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to build this structure and do it again. You're playing out karma, so you're going to be the one that's going to go back in. So thank you for building it, and also thank you for dropping that hint that like I'm not going to go in this one.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be back here again, doing this again, and I'm going to jump off.
Yeah.
Right? And he's presenting that for people to see.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the eyes to see and this is a new advanced way of being, this is my savior, right? And you fall back into that trap. It's to me, it validates like where we're at. Like it's going to start becoming that tricky and that deceptive.
Right.
We're already there. I mean, you can't tell what is real online as far as information. And most of the AI is giving a, summary, and it's kind of slighted opinion from whoever programmed it on all of the information. And that's starting to dominate people's experiences and putting them into psychosis. So it's like, that's where I'm saying it's the dark part of it. It's just like, it's very subversive. And that energy is like, I see why people say it's reptilian and all this snake is like villainizing it. But in I also, there's something that I am in awe about that energy, just snakes in general and shit. There's something about reptilians as material, the way we see them in our nature. They're mysterious and elusive, and there is a lot of beauty in them. But at the same time, that beauty is like terrifying. I used to have dreams all the time of getting eaten by snakes. It's like one of the scariest ways, I think, to die is like slowly get strangled and swallowed, but there's so much other beauty in the symbolism of a snake and the way it moves and so I see why there's like, that's the way it gets externalized in myth and stories, is like, that is a good representation of it, because when people think of a reptilian, it evokes the same feeling that I have when I think about this, or like that darkness. It's that, like, it is snake-like, but it's not a snake. It's just, that's that energy. And it's to me, it's the foundation of Matrix building. It's the foundation of game. It's so needed.
You're in here in the game. You put yourself in the game, right? And then the game is going to keep trying to pull you into the game as you wake up.
Yeah.
You know, and so it is just the game gaming, and it's, you know, ascending out of the game. You can get trapped in the game for billions of years. It really doesn't make a difference because you're just going to go on to exist infinitely anyway. And so it kind of doesn't actually matter. The stakes aren't actually that high. If you then put it to the context of like the harvest, you know, that there's a harvest every so often, that whoever is woken up in the game gets kind of harvested out. The soul gets harvested out. We're at a harvest moment where, you know, souls are either going to get harvested out. Many of those might jump right back in, but like, and then the other ones will get recycled back into the game. So if your spiritual process in this moment results in you just like LARPing your way, using spiritual terms to LARP your way back into another into another game, you're just going to get recycled back into the game, which doesn't matter. It kind of just doesn't matter either way. But the alternative is to like wake up, and waking up is becoming increasingly more and more neutral.
Yeah. I was hoping you were saying neutral, because that's like, it's the most powerful thing in all of this, and it's like so annoying because it's such a simple thing to say. You have to, like, it's always in the middle, you know. It's this and
neutral
that.
Doesn't mean like, yeah, I think that people think like neutral means no opinion, but it kind of, I guess, does mean no opinion. It just means like neutrality in this sense means that RPG role player game, like you have more and more and more and more context, and the more context you have, the more categories of reason you have, the less engaged in the game you become, right? So if you're playing like a first person shooter game where you're just seeing out of the eyes of the character, and someone runs up and pulls a gun on you or something, you're going to get like nervous system reaction in the moment. You're going to shoot before you think. You don't have the context. You don't know where this is coming from. If you're zoomed out bird's eye view and you're watching the game, you might see these people coming from far away. You see that they're actually chasing an animal with the gun. They're not even coming for you. It doesn't have anything to do with you. And so when it comes up, or you see that they're out looking, they need a place, but you've been watching them the entire time because you have all of the context. So then when they come up, you can just avoid them altogether, or you can engage with them, but everything's not so scary and nervous system or whatever, and you're far less likely to engage in the mythology because you're zoomed way out, and so you're seeing everything. So ascending means going up, and so, you know, like we said before on this podcast, like if you take a drone and look at what the camera's getting on the ground versus what the camera's getting when it's like super high in the sky, it's like more context, higher up, not hierarchically up, but higher up, like zoomed out. And so the more zoomed out you are, the more neutral your perspective is going to be because you see both sides. Right. And when you zoom out, you know, when you zoom up to let's say you had a camera that could zoom up and hover above the United States, and you could listen to every single person's mind, you're going to have all the context. And so you're going to understand that like everything isn't so clear, black and white, because everyone's operating from their own perspective. So yeah, that's like the neutrality that comes is just... It just is. And then ultimately you're let in on the big joke, which is it's one being. It's one imagination imagining all of this. And the consciousness that I have is the singular node of that imagination. And you are a different node. And when I'm dreaming, every character in that dream is a figment of my imagination. So they're all me. So the you that I engage with is me. Zooming out is understanding that you also are your own node having your own imaginations. And with that level of consciousness, I actually get to know you outside of my projection of you.
Yeah.
And then that's this other next level meta fucking cool as fuck game where you get to actually co-create together. But because I'm no longer engaging with my projection of you. Like, ideally, I'm not saying I'm there yet, but like,
and that's
sometimes
that's actually the neutrality, the way you described it there, I think that's the mechanism that disarms what we would say is the dark parasites, the negative that we can never fight them. You can't fight fire with fire kind of thing. When you get into that neutral place and you get wider, you understand how it's happening and what's going on, it disarms its ability to affect you because you neutralize it. So it actually is the way you don't like get rid of it, you understand it, and then it disarms it for you. So you do not experience the same.
Yeah, because that's all just fucking service of self. And if you understand these mechanics, then you're not going to be a victim. It's like you with dogs, right? So you were taught the dog psychology. Mm-hmm. So now you know the perspective of the dogs. So you're not likely to get into a situation where you get suddenly bit by a dog. Why? Because you have the context.
Right.
And so that's what this is. Like, so then when you understand they are a bunch of service to self people and you understand the program they're running, that these parasites are running a parasitic program. And if you can take yourself out of the mythology of being the victim of them and casting them as a villain or someone above you and realize like, oh, that's just a parasite program. So how does that parasite program work? It's this. What are they trying to accomplish? Trying to get this fucking insatiable need inside of them filled. Okay, well then how do I bypass that? How do I move around that? How do I not engage with that? How do I not log into a server with that? I mean, it's like you have the context. So it really has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And then you have people go, well, it would be nice for you to say. It's like, yeah, because you're logged into the server with them and you have a nice little story for why you're logged into the server with them. And it just is like, it's so crazy. It's such a hall of mirrors. That's
it really
exactly
is,
what
man.
it is.
And I do think that's what is always the singularity idea, this pinnacle point of technical evolution and like expansion. It, as well as like spiritual evolution, it's ripe for hall of mirrors, man. Like we're already in a hall of mirrors and there's a new hall being built right now.
Yeah. I need to eat and stuff. I was going to read about the new 55th, but
we would do that on the next one about more STO stuff, like the nuance or the lore night shit.
Maybe not. I think that's it for this one.
Cool.
Unless you had something else. All right, love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am.